Welcome to Friday's edition of COVID-19. Korea's daily tally is hovering on the 500 level today amid reservations for COVID-19 vaccinations for those aged between 70 and 74. And speaking of inoculations, we re-examine the presence of vaccine hesitancy later on with our panel of pundits. Here now is the broader pandemic coverage with our Kwon So-ah. Now, So-ah, do start us off then.
Sure, Sunny. We have almost 50 fewer cases of COVID-19 than Thursday, with 525 infections reported as of 12 a.m. this Friday. And with that, the number of domestic transmissions has also dropped to the low 500s. Now, 9 COVID-19 patients have passed away in the past day, raising the death toll to 1,860. If we go over to our map now, infections have declined in the capital Seoul, and also there's a drop in Gyeonggi-do province nearby, but we are seeing a rise here in Gyeongsang-Namdo province to the 30s. Also Ulsan, which is hit by the UK variant, remains in the 30s. Now, for the past 2 straight days, we are seeing a decline here, and also 136 fewer cases compared to last Friday. But we have to remember that it was Children's Day 2 days ago, so this could still be the effect of fewer test numbers. Now, on Saturday, it is Parents' Day, which is why officials are worried over a rise in gatherings, and that's also why they are stressing the importance of vaccination among senior citizens and calling on active participation in early vaccination registration that's kicked off for those aged 70 to 74 on Thursday and will kick off for those aged 65 and above on Monday.
We ask citizens to call their elderly parents and help them with vaccine registration in order to keep them safe from COVID-19. You can book vaccine appointments on behalf of your parents, and you can also use your smartphone for easy registration.
Now, almost 42,000 people have been vaccinated yesterday for their first dose of vaccination, and also over 73,000 for their second dose.
Right. Meanwhile, So I hear more Koreans have returned home from India.
Yes, Sunny, that's more than 200 Korean nationals who arrived at Incheon International Airport this Friday morning, the second group of residents to return from India over fears over the virus situation there. And they will stay at designated isolation facilities for 1 week and another week at their own residence. Now, India posted another record high of some 412,000 COVID-19 infections on Thursday, and also almost 4,000 fatalities. That's the highest ever posted before. And also, as of noon Korea time, it looks like another record has been broken with over 414,000 new cases reported in the past day. And with that, the total amount stands at almost 21.5 million. Also, Brazil has had the 15 million mark. We've now got 11 countries with over 3 million cases and 28 countries that have over 1 million cases, with Sweden and Belgium having hit that milestone on Thursday local time. And with that, the global total number of cases stands at 156.6 million. Those are the updates I have for now, but I'll see you back again after the briefing. Sunny?
All right, So thank you for that. I'll see you back in a bit. Right, now for more domestic coverage of the pandemic, I have our Kim Sung-yeon here in the studio with me. Welcome, Sung-yeon.
Good afternoon, Sunny.
Right, then let's start with more words of reassurance from authorities here with regard to vaccine supplies.
Right, so authorities, they have noted that there is sufficient amount of supply indeed. In a government briefing Thursday afternoon, health authorities said enough vaccines have been secured to meet the country's vaccination target. Now, on Thursday, the country received an additional 436,000 doses from Pfizer, bringing the total to 4.6 million doses. Now, if we subtract the amount that has already been used, we currently have 828,000 Pfizer doses and some 300,000 AstraZeneca doses, which adds up to more than 1.1 million shots available for immediate rollouts. At Thursday's briefing, KDCA Chief Chung Eun-kyung said even more vaccines are due to arrive in the coming weeks. Let's take a listen.
We have confirmed the final shipment date for 7 million AstraZeneca doses, which will take place between the 14th of May and the first week of June, with Pfizer doses also arriving in regular shipments without delay until June. We'll reach our vaccination goal as currently planned.
Also starting Thursday, 4 new vaccination centers were up and running, bringing the nationwide total to 261 locations. Despite the country's vaccination campaign picking up pace, the KDCA chief cautioned that vaccines alone will not defeat COVID-19 and that the novel coronavirus could become endemic in the years to come. She also warned that mutated strains of the virus could lead to a fresh rebound in cases at any time.
And Song-Yeon, speaking of mutations, what is the latest with regard to spread of the UK variant in the southern city of Ulsan?
Right, Sunny, Korean health authorities, they certainly are on high alert as they are particularly worried about the highly contagious UK variant emerging as a dominant strain in the city of Ulsan, as you mentioned. Now, Ulsan has reported some 1,100 infections since March, the most of any city excluding the Seoul metropolitan region. An average of 40 new daily infections were reported last week in Ulsan, and a study of 80 patients there revealed that 51 of them, or 64%, were carrying the UK variant. The city has mobilized extra manpower and resources to trace the sources of the infection, but there appears to be many obstacles in the way.
There are limitations to our manpower and a contacting tracing capacity in such instance of sporadic cluster infections involving a large number of people.
In the meantime, health authorities are also on high alert over the rising number of South African variant cases. At Thursday's briefing, the KDCA said that vaccines and treatments may be less effective against the South African variant and that curbing its spread was a top priority for the government. Medical experts say these mutated strains will pose a key challenge in the country's battle against COVID-19, and preventing their inflow will be decisive in determining the country's fate amid the pandemic.
I see. Let's end on an optimistic note today, Song-Yeon. I hear vaccines have been found to be very effective on the elderly.
Right. This is according to the KDCA's latest analysis on vaccinations for people aged 60 and above. It found that vaccines were 87% effective in that age group 2 weeks post-inoculation. And in addition, side effects were reported in only 0.1% of all vaccine recipients in this age group. And the importance of vaccinating the elderly has been underscored by the fact that people over the age of 60 accounted for 95% of all COVID-related deaths here in the country, despite taking up only around a quarter of the total cases. This is what KDCA Chief Chung Eun-kyung had to say regarding the matter.
Vaccinating people aged 60 and above is the most effective way to prevent transmissions among senior citizens and also to lower the risk of serious illness and death in case of an infection.
Experts say the success of Korea's vaccination campaign now hinges on public participation. The latest government survey shows that around 61% of Koreans are willing to get vaccinated. The KDCA said a significant number, quote-unquote, of vaccinations will need to be carried out in order for the country's daily caseloads to fall below 100, but cautioned that this may be difficult to achieve.
All right then, Song-Yeon, as always, thank you very much for the coverage.
Thank you for having me.
Right, it's time now for the regular briefing on the COVID-19 situation here in Korea for this Friday. Now, do make COVID-19 testing a priority should you feel a little bit under the weather. Preemptive testing, as authorities point out, will serve to stem the possible spread of cluster infections that may dramatically raise a number of new cases. Now, while we wait for the briefing to start, here are a few words related to possible physical discomforts after COVID-19 vaccination. First, as always, medical experts point out it is completely normal to feel a little bit uncomfortable for up to 48 hours post-inoculation. Now, this is reportedly an indication that the vaccine is working. But then again, as we've said time and time over, the absence of such discomfort does not mean that your vaccine is not working. Now, doctors point out our immune systems are unique and thus respond in different ways. The briefing is about to start. We'll come back to you afterwards.
Hello, let us begin our regular briefing for today. I am Kwon Jun-uk. Starting from yesterday, we have been receiving the booking and reservations for the vaccine appointment for those aged between 70 and 74, and this is smoothly being carried out. And on the 6th, the first day of the reservation, out of about 2.5 million, about 11% of them, or more than 240,000 of them have completed the reservations. And among them, about 90,000 have been received via the call center, and about 120,000 on the online, and about 23,000 through the local community centers. And the KDCA also is cooperating with the regional offices as well as the call centers, and we are also dispatching about 4,000 people who are replying to these bookings, and we are also exerting our full efforts to receive these reservations. However, due to an increase in the amount of call traffic, there could be also a congestion at certain given times. So we ask you to also help your senior patients to get the reservation via online or also through other means as well. And right now, the reservation is going through for those aged between 70 and 74, as well as those with chronic respiratory illnesses. And as for those aged between 65 and 69, they will be beginning from the Monday, the 10th. And also as for those between 60 and 64, and also the teachers at primary schools, grade 1 to 2, as well as pre-K and kindergarten, they will be beginning the booking for the 13th of May, which is a Thursday. And please note that these senior citizens aged over the age of 60 account for about 95% of all of the death related to COVID-19, and their fatality rate is also very high among compared to other groups as well. However, if they are vaccinated, this vaccine could prevent their infection by about 87%. And it is very important that you get vaccinated if you are senior citizens here living in the country in order to protect your infection and also to prevent you from having critically ill symptoms. And about 70 days ago, we began the inoculation rollout, and we were a latecomer. However, we are now placed in one of the 30th countries around the world to have the most vaccinations rolled out. And in order to prevent the further spread of the virus, and also in order to prevent the infections among senior citizens, we are also mulling over the option of allowing the visitors to visit the nursing hospitals and long-term care centers if either the visitor or the residents at these centers have been receiving those 2 doses of the jabs. And if this has been determined and if there are detailed guidelines, they will be revealed to the public as soon as possible. And also, we have different independent, separate professionals who are meeting on a weekly basis to look at the adverse responses that are reported after inoculation, and they are seeing the correlation between these adverse responses and the vaccination. So we believe that we are exerting our full efforts to enable a safe vaccine in order to also boost the level of credibility among the public. We are also going to exert our full efforts to this end. And next, at nursing hospitals and also facilities and also correctional facilities which are prone to virus infections, we are carrying out preemptive testings. And here are some primary analyses. Starting from the May of last year and also until April, we have also April this year, that is, we have been carrying out preemptive testings, and also on a regular basis, we have carried out these preemptive testings, and we identified 388 cases. And also in April alone, we have found 87 cases who were infected with COVID-19, and we have an increase about 21% decrease in the number of people tested. However, we are seeing more people who have been identified as patients through these preemptive testings. And on a local basis, we are going to also continue these testings going forward. And also starting from February 26th, also until the mid-April, we have carried out 3 million tests. And we have also identified a significant number of those people who have been infected with the virus. And thanks to these efforts and also thanks to these testings, we have been able to identify the patients at an early pace. And also we were able to carry out the preemptive testings at nursing homes and long-term care centers, and we were able to contain the proportion of these patients with critically ill conditions. And also as for the correctional facilities, we have seen a significant decline of the infections, now ranged over 1 on average. And also there has been a significant decrease in the proportion of foreign migrant workers, and they now amount to only 4.3% of the total infections, which is a significant drop. And also this is the same with other facilities that are also prone to virus infections, and this is a good trend that we are witnessing right now with our analysis. And going forward, we will be going to identify proactively these groups, people who are going to be prone to the virus. And also starting from 3rd of May, we have been carrying out preemptive testings at high schools here in Seoul City. And also starting from 7th of May, we have also been carrying out the preemptive testings for all of the community centers that are engaged in child rearing as well as women's services. And also going forward, we will also going to conduct similar testings for all of the senior related welfare services. And in general, in May, we are seeing an increase in the amount of public movement, and we could see a complacency over the control of the COVID-19 infections. We need to take particular precautions at this particular time. So if you are working at these multi-use facilities, please also comply stringently with the quarantine measures, and especially for quarantine measures at the nursing hospitals and long-term care centers, they must be strengthened, especially during this weekend marking Parents' Day. And as for the COVID-19 treatment, the remdesivir, the drug is being administered to over 6,500 patients here in South Korea, and the Recunora treatment has been administered to more than 2,600 patients across 69 hospitals here in South Korea. And last but not least, I would like to mention the following. And on a global basis, we are seeing a emergence of the virus, and also there are differences in terms of the size and the timing of these resurgences depending on these countries' lockdown as well as these restrictions and the size of the total infection. And by also countries, they have different timings of these infections and outbreaks. And even though we do not have new emergencies of another variants, we see that there is a very high possibility for the COVID-19 to circulate going forward. And as for COVID-19, compared to influenza, it is more transmissible and it is even more difficult to control. And as for influenza, we are having the annual vaccines against the influenza on a global level, and we believe that this would be the same for COVID-19 as well. And as for many countries that are speeding up with the COVID-19 vaccinations, they are also witnessing a rise in the number of cases as well. And when we reach herd immunity to fight against COVID-19, we need to think about the size of the total infections and also the index of the reproduction rate of the virus. We aim to achieve 70% of herd immunity here in South Korea, and this means that we need to return to the normalcy when we enjoyed our daily routines without face masks. And this involves our reproduction rate to stay about 2.8. And right now, our reproduction rate stands at about 1.0. And by companies, when they have lower reproduction rates, months. Despite the size of this vaccination rollout, they would have more room to contain and control the virus, and the vice versa. And we believe that we are at a good position to reach herd immunity going forward this year. And we believe that even before November, we believe that there could be clear signs of easing of the quarantine measures. And also, at the same time, we could also see full control of the COVID-19 situation as well. In order to make this possible, first, we need to carry out social distancing levels right now and contain the further spread of the virus to lower the reproductive rate. And going through the past 2 times of big, large-scale outbreaks, we learned that we could do this indeed. And second, we need to also speed up our inoculation, and also the size of the inoculation has to also be a significant amount. And when we look at the annual inoculation rate of influenza vaccines, we believe that this goal is also achievable. And third, we believe it is very important that we have credibility in the science as well. And this is the role of our quarantine authorities. And through continued analysis and assessment, we would be looking at the cases of other countries. We will be also examining our continued quarantine measures going forward. And as we roll out the vaccines to the senior citizens above the age of 60, we believe that we will have an increase of the rate of immunity against COVID-19. We will see and thereby a decrease in the number of infections, and which will lead to a possible easing and relaxing of these restrictions against COVID-19. And we believe that these phases will be gradually being present here in South Korea. When will this happen? It all depends on our participation level. Social distancing level, as well as vaccine inoculation and science and credibility, we will be basing on this. Thank you very much.
Right, that was Kwon Junuk with Friday's afternoon briefing. What did he have to say, Soa?
Well, it looks like Kwon had a lot of confidence in the government's goal of reaching herd immunity by November. But he said to really achieve that, continuous social distancing is a must, also fast vaccination and credibility in science. He also renewed the importance of vaccination among senior citizens, again stressing that pre-registration is currently underway for those aged 70 to 74 and will begin for those aged 65 and above on Monday. He also stressed that Korea currently is among the top 30 countries in vaccination rollout, while when the vaccination program started around 70 days ago, it was at below 100th. So the vaccination process is getting faster at this point. And he also mentioned the preemptive testings at high-risk facilities that started in May last year, and there has been an analysis until the end of April, for instance, at nursing hospitals, nursing facilities, as well as correctional facilities. And these preemptive tests have been found to be effective, especially when it comes to bringing down the numbers of critically ill patients. So they are going to expand that to other facilities now.
I see. Well, that's good to know. All right, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Right, meanwhile, Seoul is playing host to a cultural event that includes its 5 palaces from the Joseon dynasty. Our Chun Sung-cho is out on location with the sights, sounds and the safety precautions against COVID-19. Hello, Sung-cho. Sung-cho,
good afternoon, Sunny.
Right, so Sung-cho, which palace are you at?
Well, I'm inside the UNESCO World Heritage listed Cheongdeokgung Palace, arguably the most beautiful one out of the Seoul's main 5 palaces. And as you can see, I'm dressed in hanbok, the Korean traditional clothes, because why not? It's very pretty, and also it'll give me a free pass into the palace. Well, one of the reasons why I came here today is the Royal Cultural Festival that's taking place since last Saturday. Well, due to COVID-19 social distancing restrictions, the festival is taking place in a hybrid format, which means there's a physical venue, but also it's being attended by a live and interactive audience online. And for that to be possible, there's a set of strict social distancing protocols, health safety protocols in place. And for instance, the venue gets fumigated in between every in-person event as well. So to hear more about that, let's invite one of the festival organizers to our show. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right, so I heard that this festival has turned into a biannual event. So what is the significance of it?
Layer Culture Festival is held in 5 palaces of Joseon Dynasty and Jongmyo in Seoul. It's the largest festival. It's the largest festival utilizing Korean cultural heritage. Various programs are presented in each palace, and we are setting a precedent for a festival that can be safely enjoyed even in the pandemic.
All right, and it's been almost a week since the festival started. So what has been the reaction from the visitors so far?
Visitors are having fun in here, actually, with special programs about the layer culture. And many tourists have become interested in history through this festival. Recently, due to the pandemic, we are providing lots of online programs too. So people can enjoy the festival anytime, anywhere.
All right, thank you so much for your answer. Thank you. All right, so I'm pretty sure some of you want to enjoy the festival from the comfort of your own home, online, sitting in your couches maybe. But for those who want to come here physically, I want to show you around. And there are many activities you can participate here, like making sachets, and you can even make royal court food. But one of the activities that are available here is 고서 만들기. 고서 is Korean traditional books, and that's where you do it. So let's step inside. Well, this venue is called 규장각, which is the royal library of Joseon Dynasty. And we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years ago when they were making books without technology and factories, electricity. But before you get in, you need to digitally sign in. 안녕하세요.
규장각 체험 부스입니다. 안심콜 하도록 하겠습니다.
All right, I've already done this. So I've already verified my identification with them.
예. 그러면 체온 측정하겠습니다.
So I'm getting the temperature checked.
정상 체온입니다.
All right, normal. And I'm gonna wash my hands with the sanitizer.
인증 스티커 부착드리겠습니다.
감사합니다. And this is a sticker that will tell me that I don't have to go through the entire process every time I move in between buildings here. So, 감사합니다. All right, so there are a number of people already in the middle of the bookmaking process. And let me talk to one of the people, actually. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hi, so what is your name?
My name is Ngo Hong Nhung.
Oh, where are you from?
I'm from Vietnam.
I see. So what made you want to join this program here in Changdeokgung Palace?
Actually, because I'm a foreigner living here in Korea, so I have a lot of interest in with the Korean culture, and I really wanted to go to Changdeokgung. And I saw the ad about the experimental event on the internet. I decided to go today, and it's very cool because I thought that I'm just gonna visit around, but because I can do the real experiment, so it's super cool, and I can learn about how to make a book like back in the day without any kind of like the modern things, and they make everything super organic and it's cool, and I can bring it home. Yes, I can bring. Yes, I can bring it home. It's super cool. Yes.
Keep it as a souvenir.
It's super cool.
All right, thank you so much for your answer. Thank you. All right, so since I can keep it as a souvenir, why don't I make one myself? So actually, I was in the middle of making the book myself before I came on air. So I'm gonna ask the cameraman to hold the camera for me while I do this. So I already started with a couple of loops here. As you can see, there are 5 holes, and the key point here is to make this side-stitched binding as clean as possible so that you don't see any leftover strings showing or hanging outside the exterior of the book. So I've already learned how to do this. Like, you do it like multiple times, and then you do so that, and then you just keep going on and on and on like that. And there's a specific way of it. You go around like that, and then you hide the knot in the end. So once you're finished, this is what's going to look like. This is one of the samples here. How cool is that? Do you see? There are no glues used. There are no like anything like that. But all you use is the string here, and then it's perfectly binded. How cool is that? So yes, this is something you can try here. And like she said, you can keep it as a souvenir, and then you can also walk around the palace and enjoy the beautiful spring as well. So if you don't have anything planned for this weekend, then maybe this is one of the options you can consider. This has been Chun Sung-Cho reporting live from Changdeokgung Palace, and back to you, Sunny, in the studio.
All right, Song-Cho, first, I love your hanbok, and thank you for that royal treat.
백신의 안전성과 예방접종에 관해 충분한 정보를 신속하게 제공하여 국민 여러분께서 불편함이 없도록 하겠습니다.
Vaccine hesitancy is looking to challenge efforts to fight the pandemic amid the presence of misinformation and concerns over vaccine safety. Now, here in the studio with details on that, I have Professor Son Ho-jun from Johns Hopkins University. It's been a while, Professor Son.
Hi, Sunny. Thanks for inviting me.
And joining this session virtually is Dr. Paul Griffin at the University of Queensland over in Australia. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Dr. Griffin.
Thanks very much for having me.
I also have Tamayo Muto, a freelance journalist over in Japan, live on the line. Welcome to the show, Tamayo.
Thank you so much.
Right then, Professor Son, a recent local survey shows that the number of people in support of COVID-19 vaccines has declined, while the number of people opposed has risen. Right. How do you explain this reality here in the country?
Yeah, so I think there really isn't a single factor, but if you relate that to me on a personal level, I feel like I've seen a lot of negative and fearing news about side effects and all the deaths that are potentially still not proven that is associated potentially with the vaccination. Side effects and all these things are more predominant in our news media these days that compared to all of the positive aspects of how we have been able to get the vaccine developed so fast and then delivered to people's arms. At the same time, we have a lot of diagnostic tools that keep us, at this level, and especially in Korea, we still have, on average 500 to 600 new cases, but that's been stagnant, which means that our public health control measures, and especially each members of our society, are really doing their part, wearing masks and things like that. And those are really positive messages that we can have more than enough, but that's predominantly lesser compared to the others. So for me, I also worry about potential side effects, but I have to weigh against potential public good and benefits of taking vaccine myself, and this is an important part of the infectious disease cycle. So I feel that the domination of negative news or the fear of these side effects because of the frequency that's been reported. I'm not blaming the media, it's just natural process, and we're still learning process. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and that's part of this business, but I think that's really kind of is going to be what's going to be affecting the vaccination rates.
Right, a valid point, of course. Dr. Griffin, what is the public response to COVID-19 vaccines over in Australia, which has been quite fortunate, to say the least, in its fight against the pandemic?
You're exactly right. We've been very fortunate in terms of our excellent control in this country, having seen around 30,000 cases in total and still having less than 1,000 deaths. So while I think the message here about the benefits clearly outweighing the risks of these vaccines, when the relative benefit to individuals in the absence of many cases is low, and yet we're still hearing reports about significant side effects, it has made a few people slightly hesitant. And I think that's why it's really important that we continue to educate our population that these significant side effects remain very rare, and the benefits of the vaccine are still very significant. And while our control is excellent at the moment, it's unlikely to be that way forever. And in keeping our control, we need to rely on a lot of restrictions that I think people are getting a little tired of, to be honest.
Right. Meanwhile, Tamayo, I understand Japan's vaccination rate stands at 1.6%, which puts it on par with Myanmar, according to the Washington Post. Now, please tell us a bit about the inoculation drive in Japan.
Yeah, that's true, Sunny. So Japan's vaccine rollout is lagging behind other countries and also its original schedule. According to Nikkei Shimbun article, the number of people in Japan who are fully vaccinated is 1,040,000 as of May 6, which is only 0.83% of the entire population. The government was planning to give shots to healthcare workers by the end of February, the elderly by the end of March, and then those with underlying medical conditions, but only 20% of healthcare workers have completed vaccination as of May 1st. Now, Japan is in the middle of the fourth wave of the pandemic. Especially in Osaka, the hospital bed occupancy has been exceeding 100%, which means healthcare system has collapsed. The third state of emergency is going to be extended until the end of May. And with this situation, more than 70% of respondents said the Olympics should be cancelled or postponed again as of April 12th, according to Kyodo News poll. People think that the games should not be held at the risk of people's lives, of course, and even online petitions against the Olympics are showing excitement.
I see. Tamayo, what is the public response to vaccinations in Japan?
Yeah, so as I said before, like people are very pessimistic about that generally. Yeah, people really do not want the games at risk of the people's lives.
I see. Professor Son, what can you tell us about the rate of the reported post-inoculation adverse reactions, and how does this rate compare to, for example, those of other vaccines, including the seasonal flu?
Yeah, so the rates, especially in Korea, it's very low, less than 1% overall, right? And then in terms of close to 4 million administered at this time, 88 deaths, but ultimately with more serious conditions, about 200 overall, right? So that's very low compared to what we will see on a typical vaccination and other vaccines. And flu vaccines, I think, were on a par or even better in most of these vaccines. So I think ultimately the message would be that the vaccines are safe. It's just that there's a lot of coverage of these side effects because of the novel nature of this pandemic that we're experiencing. Everyone in the world is experiencing as a new.
Dr. Griffin, a study that sought to examine the effectiveness of AstraZeneca and Pfizer vaccines in a UK community setting found fewer cases of side effects as compared to the findings during the phase 3 clinical trials of both vaccines, of course. What are the implications of this latest real-life study?
I think it's great that we're seeing so much real-life data post-rollout of these vaccines that's showing that the clinical trials really were a good representation of just how safe and effective these vaccines are. And in studies like this, where perhaps we see fewer side effects, some of that will be down to the differences in how the clinical trial was conducted compared to how the vaccine's being used. But it also shows that the clinical trials were right and that these vaccines are safe and effective, even when rolled out outside of clinical trial conditions in a wider population and with lots of other factors that were perhaps controlled for in the clinical trials. So this is more evidence of the benefits of these vaccines and should serve to reassure everybody.
Right, and despite such evidence, Professor Son, blood clots are perhaps the most worrying factor within members of the public with regard to AstraZeneca and Janssen vaccines. Now, how do these very rare vaccine-induced blood clots compare to other general, for lack of a better word, other general cases of thrombosis?
Yes, I actually would correct you a little bit in terms of saying vaccine-induced blood clots because it's still not proven. There are theories of associating vaccine-induced blood clots basically triggering PF4 platelet factor 4 antibodies, essentially creating another set of immune response. So there are antibodies essentially not making the blood clots when there's damage in your blood vessels or your cells. It it tries to stop coagulate the blood, right? So, and when that happens, when the blood vessels heals, then all of the platelets dissolve. And ultimately, that still is left in the blood veins that causes the thrombosis or blood clots, induced thrombosis. So the cause is not yet fully defined. The scientists, at least from the 2 studies that so far published, indicate there's an association with the PF4 that's induced similar to hairpin, which is a blood thinner base induced, which this happens in the case. But in terms of the rates, typical blood clots happen in the general public about 1 out of 1,000 persons. And in the case of the UK study, following 25 million people who've been vaccinated, we found about 85, which is 300 times or less or so. So we have to be a little bit careful about discussing this, but there are investigations that's happening to try to really identify blood clot issues. And there's also, we know that blood clot issues arise because of many other lifestyle issues. So we need to be really, it's difficult to make causal associations at this time. I apologize for making that, but that's really important to make.
Right, thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
And keeping in mind what Professor Sohn has just said, Dr. Griffin, how high then is the risk of blood clots post-vaccination, do you think?
It's really important to point out that it remains an extremely rare phenomenon, what we're talking about here. So as we just heard, it's not usual blood clots. It's this unusual syndrome associated with other things like low clotting cells, the low platelets. And at the moment, while it's obviously variable depending on location to a degree, it seems to occur at a rate of around 4 to 6 per million doses administered. So as I say, remains extremely rare. But the interesting point is that as we learn more about it, it was reported early and we're looking into it a lot more, we've become better at diagnosing this early, and we've also become better at managing it. So it's something that the majority of people, if they are really unlucky enough to get this, will recover from.
I see. Dr. Griffin, I understand Australia does not have a vaccine compensation scheme in place. Do you suppose, though, that such a presence of a vaccine compensation scheme might actually boost perhaps inoculation numbers in Australia?
I think it's a complex situation, and while I support such a move, I think the rate of very significant reactions that would actually bring that into play is so little that overall I don't think it's going to contribute to hesitancy too much. But as I say, I think given the quality of the data, the transparency of the studies and the use of these vaccines, that adding this in would be something else that would just, I think, support our confidence in using these vaccines.
I see. Professor Sohn, what do you propose then to ensure a productive compensation campaign to ease public fears while at the same time boost vaccination numbers?
Yeah, like Dr. Griffin said, it's not the only factor, and it's hard to say this will promote it. But I think what's important is at this time, we know the pandemic itself has created a lot of mental problems and concerns, and this side effects, and if you have a person immediately dying after vaccination, it creates a lot of shock to the family members, anyone around them. So it's important to have some sort of a mental therapy programs in place so that we can help those people to absorb that shock, that sudden shock, and then also have create a process that can facilitate reporting and investigation and ultimately compensation, but open review process so that people who are affected can receive information about the progress and reasons and rationale. I've heard reports where people don't have any idea what's going on in terms of their investigation, and then authorities are only saying that there's no found causality of the issue. It can be very frustrating. It's important to communicate well why these issues are arising, and then try to support on a qualitative level so that they can cope with this problem aftermath.
Right. Tamayo, keeping in mind what Professor Sohn has said throughout the program, how could we perhaps then, the members of the media that is, work to perhaps eradicate or discourage vaccine hesitancy?
Yes, so I think I come up with 2 things. And first, media should always examine coverage by themselves in order to deliver the most accurate and easy to digest information about vaccination. And the second, media also should conduct fact check on disinformation and misinformation, which is already spread. In Japan, some women could not receive cervical cancer vaccines for free due to the influence of sensational media coverage on its side effects. And even recently, some media published articles with misleading headlines, which can be read as COVID-19 vaccines cause people's death. Well, the fact is that the patients died due to another disease after they got shots. Media should be aware that their medical reports directly affect the lives of those who receive the information. On the other hand, people tend to spread misinformation when they are faced with anxiety situations, trying to find cause and effects between irrelevant events. If media could actively participate in fact-checking and civil conversation, that can help people with making reasonable decisions.
So true. So true. Dr. Griffin, the general view with regard to COVID-19 vaccines then is that their tangible benefits outweigh the possible risks. What are your thoughts on this?
Look, that's exactly right. But unfortunately, as we've heard, there's a little bit of a bias towards reporting adverse events and even events that occur in people that are vaccinated that aren't related. So I think it's really important, as we've heard, to make sure we do fact check this information, to make sure we do report on the investigation after people do report adverse events to see whether it is related or not, and to keep reinforcing the benefits of the vaccine, which are challenging, I think, for people to perceive because there are individual benefits that in particularly younger people might be perceived to be minimal, but we have to think about the overall and community benefit where we can control the spread of this and hopefully take a step back towards where we were before.
Right, and Professor Sohn, very briefly speaking, do remind us about the importance of COVID-19 inoculation amid this ongoing battle against COVID-19.
Yeah, so it's important, I will always say this, but we have the tools to get over this problem. But the thing is, we have a lot of virus in our society. So largely that when we think about counting the days or counting the month of eradication or end of this pandemic, I think we should depart from that, but making longer term plans, keeping it to the tools as individual, keeping our responsibilities as the members of the society, and then acting when it's our turn to be vaccinated so that we can protect ourselves as well as others, those around us.
Right. All right, Professor Sohn, as always, thank you very much for your insights. Dr. Griffin over in Australia, thank you very much for your words. And Tamayo, thank you very much for being with us today. Right now, as mentioned earlier, the tangible gains to be secured via COVID-19 vaccination outweigh the possible risks. So do seek to partake in the inoculation drive when your turn comes around. Thank you for watching.